All right, today we're going to talk about Scratchboard. Scratchboard is a style of art where you have a thin layer of ink or paint, which is going to be over the surface of a paper. Sometimes they do it on illustration board, and then you scratch into the thin layer of paint and or ink, and the design comes out underneath. The one thing about Scratchboard, it is very unforgiving because there is no erasing. Once you scratch the line in there, then it's pretty much there to stay. All right. So the first thing we do to start this out is you want to start with a piece of good art paper. Now this is what they call 60 to 80 pound paper. It's a thicker paper. You don't want to use real thin, just like printer paper from a copier, because that isn't really going to hold up to the paint and what we're going to do to it. Okay. So the first thing that I tell my students to do is to just take a ruler, just a regular ruler, and just lay it down right on the edge and just draw a border, just the thickness of the ruler on each side. So what that's going to do for you, you're going to end up with a border just like this one right here. Okay, so you've got the border. Now the purpose of the border is when you paint on paper, because the paper is so thin, and it's still 60 to 80 pound, but it's still thin, what's going to happen is that paper is going to curl up, right? So as the paint soaks into the paper, it's going to cause the paper to curl. And leaving that border on there is going to help that paper not curl up so much. It's still going to curl, it just may not curl up as much as it would if you painted all the way to the edge of the paper. Now as soon as you get that, all you need then is crayons. And what you are going to do is you want to press down real hard on the crayon. You want to make sure that you go edge to edge and that the colors must overlap each other. You don't want to leave gaps in between them, okay? You want to make sure that the colors overlap completely, because anywhere there's the white of the paper showing, then the paint will stick directly to the paper and then it won't scratch off at the end. So we want it to look more like this and not like this. Okay, this is much too light, too many gaps happening between here. We want it completely covered. Now the pattern on this, you can pretty much do anything you want. When it's all done, it should look something like this right here. This is ready to paint. I have a couple that students were working on that aren't quite finished, so the pattern can really be anything that you want as long as you cover it up. Now, I think that random colors work best. Going back to our original Scratchboard again, I think that the random colors showing through looks fantastic. There are ways to plan out your colors, but I always like the random colors. I think that that just looks best. Now, once you get it all covered up, what you want to do then is get your black paint. Now, for this project, what I use is just simple Crayola. It's not a plug for Crayola, but this is just tempera paint, okay? Washable tempera paint. And then what I do is I pour it into a bucket and add just a little bit of water. Think about it as about a little bit more watery than you would pancake batter, right? Needs to be a little bit watery. So as you're going through, you have your paint all mixed, and it's going to kind of just drip off a little bit. Right, just drip off a little bit. I know that's a little bit hard to see, but it needs to be watered down just a little bit. Now what we're going to do from there is, for the very first layer, what we're going to do is try to just get it covered up. You don't need a lot of paint for that very first layer. For that very first layer, we're just trying to get it covered up. You don't want to purposely paint into the border. You can get a little bit of paint on there, but at the end the border will be cut off. So first we just want to get it covered. Whatever's on your brush is probably enough paint. We don't need to go dunk back in there. We're just going to want to go ahead and get it covered up. Now the next thing that I do, and again this is just me, there's lots of different ways to do it. I like to tell the students to spin it around in circles. And what that does is it breaks down the resistance between the crayon and the paint. Because again, crayons, wax, and the paint is a water-based paint. It's really going to want to resist it. But I find that kind of doing a little spin around on it kind of helps to break down that resistance a little bit, helping it get ready to stick a little bit better. All right, so once we do that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get the excess paint off of my brush, right here on the side of my cup. Then I just want to thin it out in any direction. You can pick which direction you want, but what we want is nice, thin strokes. We want to make sure that we don't have any puddles down here at the end. We have a lot of students who put too much paint, then they push it all into one area, then it kind of puddles up, and then they keep going. And even on the camera here, you can see that's a little bit wetter in here, but you want to just make sure that they go from side all the way to the side. For the brushes, I'm just using these wood handle poster brushes. They work very nicely for this one. Make sure it's not too stiff on the bristles. But we just want to go ahead and our first layer just nice and thin and even. We are not trying to get it all black on the first try because usually it ends up drying too thick. So what I tell the students to shoot for is 3 layers. So this first layer would be put on the drying rack. Then we'd mix up more paint. This has to dry for 24 hours. I find that if it doesn't dry all the way, then you just end up peeling off your first layer over and over again and it doesn't really cover. So you let this dry for 24 hours. The second layer will go this way, nice and thin. You do not need to do the spin around again on the second layer. Second layer is just nice and even going this way. And then the third layer will be nice and even going this way. We only do the spin around technique at the very beginning when we're trying to break down the resistance of the wax. After that, it's just this way, then again this way. If a 4th layer is needed, normally what I do is I will paint that 4th layer on for the student because I don't want it to get too thick. Most students will be done at layer 3, but those few that just keep pressing down too hard and ripping off their previous layers, you, the teacher, might end up having to go back and put that last layer on. Now, once it's completely dry, it should look like this. Okay, so now it's actually ready to be scratched on. Now you can use anything. Back in the day, before I had a lot of money in my classroom, what we would do is just take the white colored pencils from the pack that a lot of people don't use, even though normally you blend with them. A lot of times they just go unused. So what I would do is I would take the white colored pencil and just take a paper clip and put it onto the edge of the pencil and just tape it. But there are scratchboard tools that you can buy. This is one right here. Okay, the nice thing about this one is you can get a nice scratch from the tip right here, but you can also lay it down on its side and get a thicker line. They also have these ones right here, where these are just like pieces of wood with little nails in them. I guess you could also make your own, but anything with a sharp edge will work. And again, if you don't have anything, I think that probably even a toothpick would work, just as long as it has a nice edge to it to scratch through the layer of paint. Then again, all you do is just press down on it and there's our scratch board right there. Okay, all your random colors will show up. You take this one right here, the nice red one right here, you get a nice thin line, but if I lay it down on its side, I can get those nice thick lines going. Okay. Again, this project is very unforgiving. If you mess up, you can't go back over and paint back over it, because what ends up happening is you're actually scraping some of the crayon off as well, so now there's no resistance on this. So if you go paint back over it, now it's going to be stuck onto the paper, and if you scratch back through it, it's not going to come off. So you really got to kind of get it on the first shot. Some people do their drawing on a different piece of paper. So the students would create their designs on this paper first, making all their mistakes and erasing and whatever. And then what happens is on the back side, you flip it over and you just scribble on the back. You only need to scribble on the back of where the lines are actually at. And then the graphite from this side, when you put it down onto the paper and you trace back over this image, the pressure from the front will transfer this graphite to the back, and what will happen is you'll get a very light image of what you want to scratch, and then you can come back in afterwards with your Scratchboard tool, now knowing exactly where you need to scratch, and that's how you can get your designs on there and then have them look pretty perfect. And all your mistakes are made because, again, there is no erasing on Scratchboard. I think it's a really great project. The students always seem to enjoy this project. It's a very hands-on project, so it's a great project for the end of the year. And again, I don't know any student who does not like them. Now, as for me, I always have my students prepare 2 of them because it's so unforgiving. If you mess one up, it takes another 3 to 5 days to make another one. So if they do 2 right in the beginning, if they mess the first one up, they always have a backup. And that is Scratchboard. Hope you enjoyed that. All right, also one last thing for the elementary school teachers. You can just use crayon. You can lay down the crayon base and put black crayon over the top. I like a cleaner look with the black paint for older kids, maybe maybe the older elementary school, middle school, high school, I like to use the black paint that I just showed you. But for elementary, the younger grades, or even if you don't have the materials, you can just use regular crayon with black crayon over the top. It's going to take a lot of black crayons, but then the idea is the same, that you scratch through and then you will still be able to see the lines come through, right? So this is just black crayon on top of colored crayon, and it kind of works the same way as kind of a more generic, quicker, easier scratch board.